Hi, everybody. This is Damien from Legend Life. With our experience talks, we look to give you the tips, advice, and inspiration to get outdoors and experience more. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Jarrod Gunn McQuillan. Jarrod is the founder of Cloud9 Adventures, which is a coaching instruction company in sea kayaking. Jarrod today will give us the lowdown on how you get started with sea kayaking. So, how are you today, Jarrod?
Not too bad, not too bad. Thanks a lot for having me, Damien, and hello everybody out there.
Cool. So, well, to get started, maybe you can give us a little bit of a background about yourself and then how you got started with sea kayaking.
Sure, sure. Yeah, so I guess my introduction to paddling would have been as a youngster. So where I'm located here in Canada, canoeing is sort of part of our heritage, and it's quite common that whether you're into it seriously or just at a cottage or down by the river, is you get in a canoe usually at a fairly young age. And by the time I got to university, I met my partner, now my wife, and we both were quite into this. And so we got into doing a lot of canoe tripping. And so we were going into the woods and camping and exploring areas that lots of people didn't get to see. And then we moved to the coast, British Columbia, for a few years, and were introduced to sea kayaking out there. It's a little bit of a mecca, I would say. And out there, we kind of got into it, and that was my first sort of introduction into formal training for kayaking. And then it went from there. When we moved back to the East Coast, ended up starting my own instruction company, and have been paddling ever since. And it's I guess become more and more of an addiction, if you will.
Yeah, no, awesome. So what is it about sea kayaking you like so much?
Well, I always kind of say when people ask me that, it's the variety of things that you can get from one activity. So I can go out on a quiet morning where the water is still, and I can poke around in all the nooks and crannies and see wildlife. And so there's that sort of connecting with nature. It can be very peaceful, very good for my health and wellness that way. Um, as well as it can be a real fitness aspect to it. If I want to go out and I want to kind of push the speed a little bit and get a workout, I can do that. Great way to connect with other people. And then I guess the other one that, especially in the last 10 or 12 years, is there's also a little bit of an adrenaline side to sea kayaking, getting out in waves, tidal races, and playing around in lumpy water. And so it kind of feeds a whole bunch of my interests and passions, from calm and cool all the way up to a little bit exciting and gnarly, if you will.
Yeah, awesome. So if there's one reason you would give to someone that they should at least give sea kayaking a try, what would that be?
Well, it gives you a chance sitting in the cockpit and heading out on the water. It gives you a totally different perspective to see wherever you may live. And I've paddled in very remote areas, in urban areas, and I've even got friends on social media from different areas. And it just gives you a totally different perspective of the land around you. So I'm always drawn to that. And just getting on the water, floating on the water, connecting with the water and nature is just for me, it's my meditation. I'm not thinking about anything else in that moment but those that I'm with, or the things that are around me. And so it's a great way. It's a great way to get out and see the world.
Okay, very good. So, well, as you mentioned, you're in a pretty special part of the world. So, what would be some of the, you know, top destinations or places to go sea kayaking around where you are?
Yeah, so we're pretty blessed here on the east coast of Canada. So right nearby is the Bay of Fundy, and it's most notable for having the largest tidal range in the world, which produces some really incredible rough water paddling experiences for those that are into that. There's lots of moving water, and you get waves and things like that. But it also produces some incredible landscapes. There's some of the best paddling around. There's things called the Hopewell Rocks, where in the morning you can be walking on the sea floor, and then you come back in the afternoon and 50 feet of water have filled that area in, and now you're paddling around where you were walking just in the morning. So and then we have the whole east coast of the Atlantic Ocean that provides beautiful rocks and sightseeing. And then where I'm at, the little island I am, is in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, provides some of the warmest waters north of sort of the Carolinas. So in the summer, it can be a little paradise, if you will. So our area just has such variety, and just a great way to see things.
So what about other areas of Canada, like British Columbia? That would probably be a good location as well, wouldn't it?
Oh, 100%. Like British Columbia is spectacular for paddling as well. Being down the ocean, looking up at the mountains is pretty special. And there's so many areas along that coastline. There's deep inlets. And Vancouver Island itself, we lived out there for a while. And it's the same sort of thing. There's quiet, picturesque places to explore, and then there's also BC next to the Bay of Fundy is one of the locations where there's really world-class rough water paddling. So there's a few large standing waves that people come from all over the world to try and go and paddle. So, and that's one thing that my company does, is we run sessions to guide and take people to some of those locations.
Okay, awesome. So I believe you've also paddled internationally. So what are some of the places you've been overseas?
Yeah, well, so when we were talking before the session here, we were talking about winter. So where I am, we have winter, and so my wife and I have visited a number of places, usually in the winter, for a little getaway. So we paddled through Belize, Costa Rica, the Bahamas, and down there in the Caribbean, it can just be a whole other world, especially for a northern paddler such as myself. And there's great spots around. There's outfitters in all these places that you can connect with, and local guides and things like that. But those have been some of our favorite places, and largely because we're escaping winter to go do something we love.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what would be on your sea kayaking bucket list?
Well, for me personally, there's a variety, but one of the sort of rough water meccas out there is Anglesey, sort of the Wales area. So there's some incredible paddling there, both picturesque landscapes, but also there's a lot of moving water. If you haven't picked up yet, I kind of like tidal currents and standing waves, and so that's a spot where again, it's another spot where people from all over the world go to either get training or to go and check out these sort of waves and areas. So that would be a spot on my list for sure.
Okay, so now at your stage, you're looking for more adrenaline kind of like location.
Yeah, for sure. But in terms of for sort of a more tripping sort of aspect, there's lots of places like all down through the South Pacific. There's some amazing paddling. New Zealand, where you're originally from, is they've got some of the best paddling around. And a lot of those South Pacific islands are places that are largely untapped, but there's starting to become outfits that have equipment in those areas and starting to take people out, and they've become very popular. So my wife and I have been eyeballing those, but we'll have to maybe wait until the kids get a little bit older.
Okay. So what have been some of your more memorable moments sea kayaking?
Oh, wow. So many. Probably one of my favorite would be a recent one with my partner Heather and I. We were traveling through Belize, and the terrain there was unfamiliar to us. A lot of mangroves, and so it was quite challenging, and it was quite memorable because all the land was private. And so for us to camp, we had to we had to negotiate with the landowners whether we could stay there, and everybody was so warm and welcoming, and ended up wanting to come sit down with us and have campfire and talk, and they're interested about our culture and we were interested about theirs, and so it really became this sort of whole human connection, and that was unexpected, and it really made our trip, right? You know, meeting some of those people that you normally wouldn't meet, and get to hear and hear how they live, and see what they're interested in about us.
Oh, brilliant. So
Yeah.
bit of a cultural experience as well as the adventure kind of experience rolled in.
Yeah, we called it our cultural immersion.
Okay, cool. So, well, now let's get started and talking a little bit more about how you can get started with sea kayaking. So to get started, maybe you can give us a rundown on Cloud9 Adventures and what exactly you guys do.
Sure. So Cloud9 Adventures, we largely operate in the maritime provinces of Canada, but we do offer some programming in central Canada and on the west coast in British Columbia. And we offer a whole host of programs from first timers who have never sat in a kayak and want to be introduced to the sport, which could be just a short couple-hour session, all the way up to more advanced paddlers who have been paddling for a while and want to learn how to camp out of their kayak and want to learn to get into some of those rougher waters that I was speaking of. And so I'm certified by an organization called Paddle Canada. It's a national certifying body. And there's ones all over. The US has the American Canoe Association, and in the UK, there's the British Canoe Union. And it's essentially, it certifies me as an instructor. And I have a few other instructors that work with me. And it's funny, I've spent all this time talking about rough water and my love of it, but one of the things I love most is introducing a first-time paddler to kayaking, getting them on the water, and helping them overcome. There tends to be fears and anxiety about water and sitting in the kayak, and helping them get over that. And then you see them get the passion and the stoke for the sport.
Awesome. So, well, maybe you can give a rundown a little bit about sea kayaking, what it exactly is, and how it's a little bit different than canoeing and other forms of kayaking.
Sure. So, sea kayaking traditionally has been, longer, slimmer kayaks. It's a double-bladed paddle as opposed to a canoe, which is a single blade. And traditionally, certainly through the 70s and 80s, when it really saw a growth pattern, it was really around tripping and expeditions and going out and camping out of your kayak. It's slowly been changing, especially in the last 10 years, as there's been more of a draw to some of this adrenaline paddling that I'm talking about. So we're seeing these longer 18, 19, 20-foot kayaks they look the same, but now they're shaped a little bit different to be more agile, and they're 15 feet, maybe 16 feet. And then a sea kayak, one of the big things that they have for new timers out there is they have things called bulkheads. So people see the hatches where people store things, but inside the kayak, there's actually a little wall that blocks that off, and it's a safety feature. It helps that kayak float should the cockpit fill with water. So that's one thing that separates a sea kayak from a recreational kayak, that some recreational kayaks will just have a totally open cockpit. And if that boat fills with water, then the boat doesn't sink, but it submerges underwater. So so that's one consideration for people looking to get into it is there are different types of kayaks out there.
Yep. No, very good. So what are there any limitations to getting started with sea kayaking?
Well, I guess, depending on what you want. I mean, there's obviously a cost implication. It's a fairly gear intensive activity, and you've got a kayak and paddle, and you've got your personal flotation device, and depending on where you paddle, there's requirements that the government want you to have, such as some throw rope and things like that. Flexibility, is often one of the limiters that I see, not in somebody getting into a kayak and getting around, but being able to make their kayak maneuver the way they want to is being flexible. So quite commonly with clients, that's, people think they need to get stronger. And I sort of always push them towards, well, make yourself more flexible first, and then you can worry about that strength, because you need to get your body into certain positions. So, kind of like this legend life, it's about, maintaining fitness, and many of us out there are multi-sport people. And so, a lot of my clients, they like to mountain bike and hike and rock climb. And so, all that sort of stuff, staying active is going to allow you to step into something like kayaking, quite seamlessly. But flexibility is a big one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, so certainly age isn't a limit if you're kind of like maintained yourself and you're kind of flexible.
Well, no. So maybe let's share a little story. I've got two friends. They'd be clients, but they've become really, really good friends. And one's 65 and one is 72. And they go to these locations that I'm talking about, these rough water locations, and just phenomenal, right? I aspire to be able to do that at their age.
Yeah.
But the one gentleman, he just got into kayaking. He would have been late 60s, and in 3 or 4 years, he paddled all the way around Nova Scotia and paddled all the way around Cape Breton. These are fairly significant undertakings, and he's always remained active, wasn't in kayaking, but always remained active throughout his life. And then he just fell in love with the sport and took it on. So age really isn't a limitation. Certainly, as some people age, we get little dings and things
Yeah.
like that slow us down. So those things can impact you, but there's no reason that most people can't get into a kayak and head out and explore.
Awesome. So what are
Yeah.
some of the basic skills you need to kind of like get started?
Yeah. So I'm obviously biased. I'm a kayak instructor, so I always tend to encourage people to go seek some help, certainly early on, and purely just it sets you on the right path for developing good habits. Like everything, it's by the time you get doing it enough, it's muscle memory that it comes down to. So if
Yeah.
you build poor habits, then you're kind of stuck with those, or stuck with trying to change those. But it's getting in that kayak. Some of the skills are going to be learning that flexibility, so you'd be controlling that boat with your lower body. It sounds counterintuitive, but that's how you create stability with your kayak. It's with your hips. And then some of the main things that we teach early on are, we go through some drills to make people feel comfortable in that boat, let them realize that their boat can turn and edge in certain ways. And then the big one is rescues. We teach people, while we don't plan to often go in, and it's never, never usually the goal when we're going out, but should you go over, we like to really focus on, how can you get back in with the help of another, or on your own? And that's a big confidence booster. I see people who take programs where they learn rescues,
Yeah.
those people get out and they paddle more and more and more, because they feel confident, right? They've got a skill set.
No, brilliant. So what should you be looking for in an instructor or coach to kind of get you started?
Yeah. Most places where you are, there's probably somebody fairly close by. I mentioned in an earlier question there some of the certifying bodies. I think having somebody who's certified by a national body is beneficial. That they're coming with a certain skill set. There's benchmarks to ensure that they're providing safe and quality instruction. So in Canada, that would be Paddle Canada. In the US, the American Canoe Association. And then internationally, the BCU, which was one of the first programs ever created, has seemed to, like in Europe and throughout, it's seemed to branch out into other countries outside of England. And so, finding somebody that way, and then if you have a connection, hopefully there's a variety of people. And if you meet somebody and you have a connection and you learn well with them, then it's probably a great hit if you want to continue with them. And if you're not feeling it and you're not liking the style, then hopefully there's somebody else around that you can kind of go and see if it's a good fit for you and your learning ability.
Yep. No, good.
Yeah.
So you've kind of like the sea kayaking interest is kind of like taken over, and now you want to kind of upskill a little bit more. So what are some additional instruction that you can look to get? So you've learned the basic skills, you've learned how to do the rescue, but now you kind of like really want to go to the next level, take it to the next level. And I believe that's kind of like where you guys come in as well, to kind of provide them next level kind of training. So what's available at that point?
Yeah, so all these systems essentially have, a variety of levels, and and essentially what it's doing is it's getting you out into more exposed coastline, so less protected areas. When you start out, we pick really protected areas to teach these skills where the water's really flat and calm, and that allows you to really see how your boat responds to what you're doing. And then as we progress, we essentially go into more exposed coastline, more what we sometimes like to call textured water. So there might
Yeah.
be some ripples and waves. And essentially we're taking those same skills and now we're applying them to a more challenging environment, and refining them. So, early on, we just teach, it's very command focused. We tell you how to do something and you do it. Whereas as you progress on, it's usually we're exploring what works best for us. All these systems have higher levels for people to go out and explore, and it's usually people who either are interested in rough water or interested in getting out and exploring areas that are more exposed, and so they need to gain skills beyond just those sort of hard paddling skills. They need to get navigation and weather interpretation and all of these sort of things, because now, depending on where you are, you could be in a coastal environment, and understanding what the environment might do is going to help you make good decisions, because really that's what we're trying to do, is allow people, I have a little motto I use is developing self-reliant paddlers. And that's my goal. My goal is to give people skills so that they can make good decisions out there. And if it doesn't look like it's going to be good to get out to that outer island, then you choose not to go and you make a good decision and you come back another day.
Yep. No, very good.
Yeah.
So, so what are some of the considerations you just mentioned, like weather considerations? So how do you choose the destination where you go sea kayaking?
Yeah, if it's for a day trip, it depends on what your goal is. So if it's a day trip or if it's a longer trip, you're gathering information on, you become a weather hawk. You're watching the
Yeah.
weather, for us as paddlers, wind is obviously very, very important. There's a wind speed at some point where we can't, paddle against it. So if we're planning on getting offshore, then we need to consider that. Tides, depending on where you are, tides are very important because they can create currents and things like that. So it's really, slowly gaining that experience to interpret all this information. And then, depending on your personality, some people are more risk averse, then,
Yeah.
they make decisions for them. And then other people, I'll be honest with you, I've made some decisions that I regretted, and I made it, but I learned from that too, right? I learned from that, right? They weren't unsafe situations, but you learn from it, going, okay, I'm gonna change how I do that next time.
Yeah. No, good. So how long do you think you need to invest in upgrading your skills to get to, a reasonably high level of competence and skill level?
Yeah, like it's certainly personal, and then it's what we always say is it's time and boat. That bum in the seat, and so somebody can take a beginner course with me, and then they go off and they're paddling multiple times a week.
Yeah.
Well, at the end of the year, they may be ready to, they may have refined those skills on their own, and they're ready to move on. Whereas you may have somebody who takes that same course and maybe paddles once or twice a year, and then 6 years later, they're in a far different spot.
Yeah.
So it's really, as opposed to like years or things like that, it's more how much time you spend in your boat. And some people they take that introductory course because it makes them feel confident, and then they just get out and paddle. That's all they want. They're not interested in refining their skills. They just want to get out in nature, and that's cool. But there are other people who, you see them, you set them off with a task after the end of the first course, and they're out playing with edging with their strokes. They're looking to improve, and so they're probably somebody who's going to be ready to progress quicker because they've actively put effort into refining those skills.
Yep. No, definitely.
Yeah.
So now a person's kind of like reached a reasonable level of skills, and maybe they're going, well, now I'm ready to invest because I'm going to be the person who's going to paddle once or twice a week, not the person who's, as you said, the weekend warrior. Occasionally will come along and go for a paddle. In that case, better to kind of hire your sea kayak. So now this person's very interested, wants to invest in their first sea kayak. What
Yeah.
are some tips and pointers for, deciding on your first sea kayak?
Right on, right on. Well, I often see there's a progression in that people often might get a more cost-effective kayak to start. It may not be a full sea kayak. They get what we call a recreational kayak or a transitional kayak, which is kind of in between recreation and sea kayak. And kayaks have good resale value. Like the used market for kayaks is usually quite good. And so people at the point that you're talking about, they probably already had a kayak, they've been paddling, but now they've outgrown their kayak. They want to take their paddling to places where that kayak isn't suitable anymore. And so they sell and they're looking for. So to your question on tips, it's, get your bum in that kayak and test paddle it. I think the best piece of advice is sit in it and try it, because if it doesn't feel right, you're probably going to feel it early on. And then it's a good sense to move on. The other sort of overarching tip too is like, think about what, the majority of your paddling is going to be. So earlier I talked about there's longer, straighter kayaks for going fast and tripping, or there's these shorter, more nimble sea kayaks for play. Think about what you think, 75% of your paddling is going to be, and pick a kayak that sort of fits that mold. Like everything, manufacturers often have kayaks that they like to say is the all-rounder and can do everything. And while, some of them are pretty good at that, in general, a hull design is developed for, is leaning towards one thing or the other. And so think about what that is. If you think you're going to be out tripping and going from A to B and seeing places, then get a kayak that's, fast and stable. If you think you want to go and play in lumpy water and things like that, or even poke around a lot into quiet spaces, a more nimble, dynamic kayak might be the right fit for you. But yeah, sit in that kayak and make sure it fits, and really think about where you're going to be paddling that and what type of paddling you want to do.
So what kind of a cost are we looking at to kind of get started? So forget about the high end ultra, I'm the person who goes out all the time, expert, but like a beginner kind of like wants to go paddling regularly, new and used, what kind of price ranges are we looking at?
Sure. So I'll use Canadian dollars. I'm Canadian, so we use Canadian dollars, and people can kind of go from there. For a recreational kayak, I think the cheapest type of kayak you can often find will be $200 or $300. They're usually fairly poor construction. That's my observation. But to get a decent recreational kayak, you're probably looking at around $800. It'll be decent materials. There's probably a few safety features which will come in handy once you sort of learn a few things. And then transitional kayaks, which are usually just stable like a recreational kayak, but start to bring some more safety features like sea kayaks, like bulkheads that I mentioned earlier, and things like that. You're going to get into $1,200 to $1,500. And then a sea kayak, an introductory plastic sea kayak, you're probably looking at a couple $1,000 Canadian. And then once you get into fiberglass, the price goes up. You're getting into $4,000 or more. And then, as you said, then the sky's the limit. You want to get into all the new materials and whatnot. They can get up to $7,000 and $8,000, I think. Yeah. So that's kind of the range for new. And then used is, they hold their value. Certainly, the transitional and sea kayaks hold their value. Recreational kayaks don't hold their value as much because they're already at a pretty good price point.
Yep.
But a plastic kayak that say you purchased for $2,200. If you used it for 4 or 5 years, you're probably going to be getting $1,400 or $1,500 for that kayak. So they can hold their value. They can hold their value if you treat them well.
Okay, cool. So what are some of the other equipment you kind of like need to get started? You mentioned a few earlier on. So, even if you don't want to buy the kayak, You just want the basics, your stuff, so that whenever you go higher, you've got all the basics kind of like for yourself.
Yeah, yeah. Well, normally if you go and you rent or hire a kayak, like you said, usually these outfits will provide you with all the necessary equipment.
Yeah.
But if you want to go out, obviously a paddle, and there's a whole variety of materials from plastics up to carbon fiber that can be used for those, and prices according.
Yeah.
PFDs, personal flotation devices, or life jackets, people often call them. That's going to be important. And it's, I don't know, I guess it depends on your risk aversion. I always, wear that thing. Oftentimes people sit on it. And, if you do go in, you'll find out very quickly putting a buoyant life jacket on while you're swimming is very challenging.
Yeah.
And then jurisdictions have different requirements. So here in Canada, we require having 50 feet of floating throw rope, be able to throw to somebody if they got separated from their kayak. You need a sound signaling device. For us, we often use a little whistle just attached right to our PFD, right on our vest. And then you need a bailing device, something to take water out of your cockpit. And so some people just use an old container, or I have a little bilge pump. It's a little manual pump that you can pump the arm and it shoots the water out. And so those are like government enforced requirements. But then beyond that, it's going to be thinking about what you're going to do. Do you want to change your clothes in a dry bag and a little bit of food and water and maybe a small little ouch kit or first aid kit? Should you do something depending on where you're going? So, from there, it just depends on where you're going and how long and things like that.
Yeah. No, awesome. So do you have any kind of like additional tips, suggestions for anyone who wants to try sea kayaking?
Yeah, I mean, if oftentimes one of the biggest things that I hear is there's a fear of the water, fear of going in, which kind of seems like a juxtaposition. People want to take on this sport, but they're a little bit concerned about the water. And usually it's this sense that they feel like they're going to be trapped in the kayak if it goes over, and people quickly find out that actually it's more difficult to stay. If the kayak goes over, it's more difficult to stay in than it is to come out. So I think the big tip is if you have some of those fears and apprehensions, but you want to get out there, it's find somebody, because they're going to take you through a coach or instructor is going to take you through a progression to help you work through some of those concerns, and then you're going to be empowered. You're going to put that fear aside, and that's going to allow you to overcome those issues and get out there. That's the big one for me is find somebody who can show you, and maybe it's only a 2-hour session and that's all you need, then great. Or maybe you get hooked and you want to explore more.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's change tact a little bit. What's your definition of adventure?
What's my definition of adventure? I don't know if I have a clear definition, but for me, when I'm adventuring, it's going out and seeing new places. And those new places can be in my backyard, but going out and seeing new places, there's probably a little bit of uncertainty to the activity, uncertain of what we're going to see, uncertain of what we're going to encounter. And adventure usually means, seeing new things like maybe animals and wildlife and things like that, and sharing that with someone else. I do some solo trips, but sharing them with a friend or a partner is usually enhances those experiences. So yeah,
definitely. Awesome. So so for anyone out there, like obviously you're very much into the outdoors and going off and having adventures, what would you say to others on the benefits of actually adding more adventure, experiencing more to your life?
Yeah, I mean, well, now there's a plethora of research out there around, whatever term you want to use, nature therapy. There's blue therapy, which is, being near the water and ocean. There's huge health benefits just to not only the physical ones, but the mental ones as well. and getting out there and reconnecting with, many of us, as we know, live in urban centers and it's not as easy to get access to the outdoors and things like that. And so getting out there and maybe pushing your comfort a little bit, sometimes pushing your comfort level a little bit is, can be exhilarating, and you surprise yourself. You end up doing things. One of the biggest feedback I get on sessions is people saying, I didn't think I was going to be able to do that. I didn't think I could do that. And it's so empowering that it just opens up a whole new world. So yeah, getting out there and getting in the trees and getting in the ocean and maybe pushing yourself a little bit, and you'll probably surprise yourself.
Yep. No, very good. So what advice would you give to those approaching or have reached 40 who are viewing it negatively or have some anxiety, going, oh my God, I'm 40 or something along those lines? So what would you say to them?
Well, it's, you can say all these little catchphrases, age is only in the mind or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
So I'd be lying. I was athletic growing up. I was a university athlete, swimming, and so I'd be lying saying that my body isn't different than it was. It's, so one is, listening to that body. Your body takes a little bit longer to heal, and you may not be able to go after things the same way you did when you're 25. Doesn't mean you can't still go after them, but you gotta listen to that body. And for me, it's been a change in focus away from, I still do strength training, but really focusing on that sort of flexibility. So keeping all those joints and muscles, healthy, has been really, really beneficial, because, even still doing that, I can feel like, oh, geez, bending over all of a sudden, it's a little bit different than when I was 25. And so, I spend a lot of time doing yoga and mobility work and keeping that body capable. And then I'll have to steal my wife's grandmother's little saying. She was 95 and she'd be going into old age homes and helping 75-year-olds, right? And she always just said, you rest your rust, you rest your rust. So I feel like it's get out there and use that body, right? That's when it's gonna keep it moving.
I like that.
Yeah.
Move or rust. So no, that's
Yeah,
definitely a
yeah.
good one.
Yeah.
So what's your definition of living your best life, or what I call a legend life?
Yeah. It's for me, kind of looking at your stuff and thinking about it. It's not creating those barriers. I think oftentimes these barriers are in our mind, and society's telling us that we're aging, and it's easy to get that dialogue going in your mind, and so it's parking that stuff and getting out there. For me, it's following my passion, right? And my passion is kayaking, and I'm trying to do that. My passion also is the outdoors. My wife and I are actually in the process of starting a new business, a 4-season adventure and glamping resort here, and it's about that. It's about sharing that with other people. We oftentimes are inviting people in who aren't used to doing that sort of stuff, and
Yep.
we kind of introduce them to it. And so for me, the legend life is passing on this passion and this stoke that I have for the outdoors to others, and hopefully it becomes a little bit contagious, and they start getting out there too.
Yep. Awesome. So to close out, what are 3 life lessons you've learned in life that you think are of value to pass on to others?
Oh, well, 3 life lessons. That's a good one. Well, I guess maybe the first one is to, think of progression. So, oftentimes we get into a new activity and we're, depending on your personality, you're all in, and you throw yourself at it. And so just thinking about progression, making sure that you're kind of moving along at an appropriate stages, that's probably going to create longevity. It's going to create longevity. The second one would be is, guess what? If you're going to go out in the outdoors, you're probably going to make a few mistakes, and you're probably going to do a little few things, and that's how we learn, right? That's how life is. That's sitting in an office and working. That's how you learn, is you make a few mistakes and you correct them and you get better. So it's not striving too much, and just knowing that when you get out there, you're going to learn, you're going to get better. And the third is if you're out there, some people, they take it so seriously. If you're out there and you're not having fun, you're probably doing it wrong. It's like,
Yeah.
back it up a bit, come back to where that activity was really fun, and then nurture that again, and then see where it goes. If you're not having fun, you're not doing it right.
Yeah. No, awesome points.
Yeah.
So, Jarrod, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. I'm sure a lot of people got some value, and I'm sure a lot have got some ideas and tips, ideas to kind of like get started with sea kayaking now. So, how can people find out a little bit more about yourself and also Cloud9 Adventures?
Right on. Yeah. Well, we're on social media on Instagram. Cloud9 Kayak is my handle. We have a Facebook page, Cloud9 Adventures, and a website, cloud9adventures.ca. And all the information's on there, email and phone number. Love chatting with people. And if they're thinking of coming to Canada or the East Coast of Canada or the West Coast, I've got a couple instructors out on the West Coast. We've got people that can help you get out there and explore some of these new areas. So yeah, those are probably the best spots to find us.
Awesome. Well, thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Damien. This was great.